Today, I'm really excited for today's webinar because this webinar with Wursta is in partnership with Google and Etsy. So thank you so much for their involvement. My name is Chris, and I work with Wursta. Wursta is a Google Premier Partner. We've been a Google Premier Partner and have been working with Google since 2014. So we've been doing this for a while, and we've been implementing Gemini inside Etsy. And that's what this webinar is about today and how we did that. And you can look forward to that in the future. In fact, I have two awesome guests here today with us. First, we have Danny, and also we have Colin. Feel free, guys, to introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everyone. My name is Danny Pellegriti. I work at Google as a Google Workspace specialist, which includes everything generative AI. I've been at Google for 3 years and super looking forward to talking about the journey of AI and where we are today and how we've worked with Etsy and Wursta in particular. Colin?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Colin Wilkinson. Good morning. I'm also really happy to be here. I'm an engineering manager within Etsy's internal IT team, where I manage a team of engineers responsible for our enterprise SaaS systems, which includes Google Workspace and Gemini.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here. And again, my name is Chris. I'm the lead Gemini Google Workspace trainer here at Wursta. I've been with Wursta for about 2 years and some change. I also used to work at Google in the New York City offices from 2018 to 2021. And I've been training with technology for a lot of my life. So yeah, happy to have all of us here. We're a great group of people. So today, for the agenda for today's webinar, we're going to first be going to Danny, who will explore the AI journey with Gemini. Then I'll take over for Gemini in action, showing you how to use it, what's cool about using it, and how people are using it today. Then we'll move over to Colin, who will talk about how Etsy transformed their customer support with Gemini. And then we'll move back to me with talking about security with Gemini, pricing and transformation packages at Wursta. And we'll end everything with a Q&A as well. So looking forward to that. But for now, for number one, I'm going to pass everything over to Danny. Take it away, Danny.
Thanks, Chris. So we're really in a really exciting time of our lives to be talking about generative AI and how we use this in our everyday life. It's kind of really hard to not either read about it or hear about it or see it in some way, whether we're using it on our phones or at work or at home or whatever it might be. So it's here to stay, in my opinion, and I think that's the opinion of most here, but in particular Google, that's pretty much all we talk about as an AI-focused company here. So to take a step back, because I like to talk about, like, where did AI come from? AI is kind of used very generically, I think, and we're going to talk about the four main pillars of AI in a second, but let's zoom out for a second, because the industrial revolution of artificial intelligence can really be compared to the breakthroughs that we've seen over the past 200-300 years, from steam power to electricity to IT in the 60s. And now we're in this really new generative AI or artificial intelligence stage, which I think is a really super exciting time to be working and around and just seeing how all of our workflows and our day-to-day life, even in our personal lives, are changing and adapting to AI. Now, if you zoom in a bit, right, like in our lifetimes, we can remember, most of us can remember, like in the early 2000s when the internet really started blowing up in a good way. And then we segued somewhere along the line into mobile, right? Like mobile became a thing where we started using our mobile devices, whether it be tablets or phones, to be able to do the things that we do every day on computers and such. And in the 20s, right, we started introducing AI into our workflows. But it wasn't until, I would say, like the last year or two where generative AI really started to come to fruition and create useful use cases. And we're just scraping the surface here. I know we've heard that a lot, but working at Google, literally generative AI, like the features and the products and how we use it and the improvements, changes probably by the day in a positive way. So it is a very competitive market. It's important to stay in touch, but ultimately it does provide value to workers as well as things in your personal life as well too. Now, these are the four pillars of AI. Like, this is not new news, but so if we started with classification has been around for a while, 15 years or so, and think of things like using your Google Lens to be able to take pictures of things and understanding what kind of tree it is, or classification of doing CAPTCHA, like when you're using it for multi-factor authentication and identifying what things are. Then, of course, prediction and predicting whether it be the price of a barrel of oil or stock, or sequencing in terms of what comes next. And then we have understanding and being able to summarize documents and things like that, and more simple type of tasks. But where the explosion really happened, I would say in the end of 22, 23, is generative AI. And that's where the generation aspect of things comes through. So understanding that the Gen AI aspect of it is that's really what we're zooming in on. And that's where the product is really, increased in value, in particular using Google Workspace with Gmail doc sheets and slides. And there's a whole slew of things where we're going to talk about things like Notebook LM. And if you haven't talked about or heard about Notebook LM, I highly recommend it. It's probably one of my favorite products to date. Talking about the history of AI, though, there are a lot of things in Google Workspace that we've been incorporating AI into our product set. And sometimes you take it for granted, right? Like something like sentence complete or spelling and grammar suggestion, smart compose, things like that. This has all been the journey across the years that we've been implementing AI into our product set. And now we're at 1 year later, 2024 is where Gemini, formerly known as Duet AI, if anybody has really been following our products, is kind of where we are today. Now, zooming in a bit from last year, we've added a ton of features into Gemini for Workspace, from increasing the large language model capabilities with 1.5 Pro, Notebook LM, incorporating features into items such as Calendar and Google Chat, increasing the ability to create awesome images with Imagen 3 in October. We have this available in over 50 languages. Calendar, Keep, Gems is a topic that I'm sure Chris is going to go into today. It's also one of my favorite products that's part of Gemini for Workspace. And of course, having the Gemini mobile app, right? Like, we finally came out with that, and you can talk to that real time. And if you haven't tried it, I highly recommend it, but it's an awesome feature. And again, I'll mention Notebook LM is something that comes as part of Gemini for Workspace. The key thing about Notebook is that it's grounded. That's the key word, is that you're grounding it to particular documents or websites that you strictly want to do more research on or learn. It's an easy way to learn about things. And of course, the audio podcast feature of it is game changing. And we're going to go into more of that a little bit later as well. And of course, all of this comes with compliance as well, too, for regulated industries. And that's super important to know just about the journey that we've been on. And this is not all. I didn't want to overcrowd this slide here, but there's always something to talk about in terms of how customers are integrating Gemini for Workspace into their workflows and really kind of transforming how we're doing business. So I talked a little bit about Notebook LM and about grounding, and Chris is going to go into a little bit more of this later in the demo. But I would say, think of it like this: if you were able to take a PDF or a document that you're working on, or a multitude of documents, and let's say you're studying or you're doing research on a client, or you're being able to just do research on a product, and you really want to ground it to specific documents that you have access to, as opposed to having it just go out to the web or the entire large language model, right? And being able to encompass the data that you want to be able to learn more about. You could do things as upload a document and create FAQs in a matter of seconds. You can have it summarize the entire document. You can have it ask questions in particular to what you're talking about and make you think about things a little bit differently. So think about, even if you're a salesperson, right, and you're collating all this information on a client that you're going after or a product that you're trying to sell. Often hearing about it in a different way will give you sound bites on how to talk about the product better, how to sell the product better. So there's many different ways and use cases to use Notebook LM. And we announced late last year that Notebook LM is now part of the Gemini for Workspace license as well, too. Quick story, though, on Notebook. Notebook started as kind of like a 20% project internally here at Google. And it really went viral, in particular with universities and schools around the world. And it really became an enterprise product only a couple of months ago. So super excited about that. And I encourage you to take a deeper look into that, especially after look at Chris's demo here today. So I'll end with this, is that modern work calls for advanced IE features. And I think the way to think about this is applicability. What everyone is so excited about AI, the reason why we're hearing it so much in the news and the media, in your work life and your personal life, it's applicable to pretty much every use case, every job function. It doesn't matter if you're a marketing professional or if you're a sales professional, or if you're working for a telephone company, like whatever it might be, there's a place for generative AI to fit into your workflows in one way or another. So, between model advancements or just being able to double and fact check things on Google search, complex reasoning, so being able to really understand like complex spreadsheets and things like that to be able to do your work faster. I mean, I had an example of a customer that was using complex reasoning to compare contracts to compliance that they need to adhere to, which would normally take about 15 to 20 minutes per contract. That type of work was streamlined down to 30 seconds per contract. So just think about the time savings there. And I would iterate that this is not a substitute for our work, right? I think people sometimes get scared about eliminating jobs and things like that. It's truly a tool to be able to amplify the work that you do, help you be more creative, efficient, and being able to get things done faster in a way that I think we're all required to do more with less these days. And leveraging this type of technology and adapting to it is going to be able to help you be more successful. And Chris is going to talk about gems. And gems essentially is, just think of that as a search, but you put guardrails and parameters on what that search is supposed to be. So for example, if every time I go to that search, I want to identify that I'm a workspace specialist and I only care on business use cases, when you query your questions or your prompts, it's going to stick to those parameters there. And that's super helpful with clearing out the noise and making things a little bit more relevant to what you're looking for. And file uploads and data analysis really goes with complex reasoning. It's everything that includes Google Workspace, but also our competitor products and PDFs and links on the web and things like that. And extendability. I mentioned that we also have this extending into Google Calendar and Google Keep and Google Chat, and being able to really integrate everything into one space and really have that communication level between everything that you're doing. That's where the power comes in, right? It's because you begin to not have these siloed ways of being able to discover information, where you're really encapsulating everything you do into one space where it's going to understand all the data that you have available to you. And from here, I'm going to pass it over to Chris, and we'll dive a little deeper into a demo of what we're talking about today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Danny. And Danny, we really appreciate your support throughout all this as well. It's great to have folks at Google like Danny that we can reach out to, ask questions, and have them support us along the way as we support Etsy. So going into talking more a little bit about Gemini and then demonstrating the actual power of Gemini, not just talking about it. I really want to just highlight a little bit more of what Danny said, in that Gemini is creative and collaborative. It helps you get your job done faster, because so many times our jobs are just staring at blank screens or blank pages, willing something to be there, and Gemini sort of kickstarts that right away with helping you collaborate, helping inspire you, and also for me, it helps motivate me as well. Sometimes I'm just talking to Gemini like it's my therapist occasionally. But yeah, it helps you save time. 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, 10 minutes there. Helps me summarize documents and email threads. It can look at an entire email thread and give me the facts that I need to know. It helps me rewrite something. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit inarticulate when I'm writing an email and I want to send an email to a CFO or a CEO or someone of stature, and I can highlight what I've written and have Gemini rewrite it in a more professional tone, right? It helps me look at data in whole new different ways, and also it helps me engage with customers in natural language, and even customers engage with me because they're using Gemini and maybe English isn't their first language. Gemini helps with that as well. And generally, it just improves the quality of your work. If you have Gemini over your shoulder, fact checking you, making sure that what you're writing makes sense, thinking about things in ways that you haven't thought about something, or having a conversation and going down the line, going through thought processes, it helps you form content that is at a much higher standard that a lot of other people are not used to. And also using Gemini, it's not just I like to highlight this when I train folks, but it's not just a one button solves everything sort of tool. You have to work with it as if it's a coworker. And this is taken from Google's prompting guide that we will be giving at the end of this call. But it sort of highlights how to make a really good prompt in Gemini. The crappier your prompt, so to speak, the crappier the output from Gemini you're going to have, or more the more vague as well. So if you just say, for instance, write a blog about sustainable backpacks, that's a bad prompt. You should be more specific. Why are you writing that prompt? Who is what is the point of view of that prompt? What is the point of view of that blog post? What blog posts have worked in the past? What haven't? Who's the audience? All of these things should be added into the prompt structure to get a more specific response. So, for instance, in this example, you can see that it's recommended to use a persona, a task, a context, and a format. And I like to call this the Princess Bride way of doing things, because it looks a lot like, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Because that has the persona, that's Inigo Montoya. That's the task, and that's preparing to die. The context is you killed my father. And the format, I guess, in that way is a sword fight. But yeah, so using all these things can specify your prompt and make a better output with Gemini as well. It's also important to highlight really quickly Gemini Workspace privacy and security. I am sure that someone on this call has a coworker or someone who works for them that is using AI in a third-party capabilities, but not thinking about the security around that. Because a lot of, and most of, all third-party AI LLMs don't have terms of service that you sign. So you might be putting in specific customer information or specific information that now that model is being trained from. But you can guarantee that Gemini does not do the exact same thing. In fact, it's the exact same terms of service for Google Workspace. That's the same thing for Gemini. So, for instance, Gemini does not train off of what you are putting into it, the data that you are putting into it. It is actually very recently HIPAA compliant and compliant for a multitude of other certifications as well. And also means that data access and controls are the exact same as Google Workspace. So you have access to the files and data that you have access to, and it's the same thing for Gemini. So you cannot, for instance, ask Gemini, what are my boss's emails and how is he responding to them? Or she, you can't do that because Gemini doesn't have access to that. If you are in finance, you can probably say, hey, what are the finance documents inside my company? And Gemini will find it. But if you are not, then you will not have access to any questions or capabilities from Gemini related to that. All right. So it's a pretty simple, your data is your data is your data inside Gemini and Google Workspace. Also, I'm going to highlight Notebook LM as well. Danny talked about it quite a bit, and I think it's best to just show it instead of talking about it. So I'm going to move past this slide and just go straight on into the demo of Gemini. I'm going to share my entire screen, make sure it looks good. Awesome, cool. So this is my demo environment inside Gemini. You can see that gemini.google.com is where I like to start explaining about Gemini. What you're actually getting is a rocket blast through the type of trainings that I do with clients and customers using Gemini. Because a lot of times when you get Gemini, it's sort of like you're a deer in the headlights staring at something and not knowing where to start or where to begin. And I always like to begin here at gemini.google.com. So we're talking about Etsy. So I'm just going to say, tell me about Etsy, just to get a start. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Let's see what it does. Oh, it knew that I was talking about Etsy. That's awesome. Yes, that's what I mean about Etsy. So it's giving me sources related to my question. So Wikipedia articles, websites as well. It's giving me information and it's showing me where I can find those sources so that I can see, like, sometimes with AIs, you can get the issue of hallucinating occasionally. So that's why sourcing inside Gemini is really awesome. But with that hallucinations, you can come into problems, right? So that's why I like to ground my questions with Gemini, and it's really easy to do that. Grounding is a sort of new AI term. It really just means backing up your sources and knowing where your sources are coming from. So that's why I created this Google Drive folder. So I'm going to go and say at Google Drive because Gemini is integrated inside Google Workspace throughout all of it. I'm going to say, tell me about Etsy and see what happens instead. Okay, now it's integrated into my workspace. So it's actually looking into my documents and finding information and grounding that information, new keyword, grounding that information in the documents information that I have. And you see that the documents here are all PDFs. We got a Wikipedia article. I just printed these out offline. Environmental goals, how is selling? It's finding more documents inside that, and it'll be able to tell me or answer my questions in just a second. It's taking longer than it usually does, to be fair. But I like to use these for different conversations as well, so I can continue my conversation that I'm having with Gemini. So you can see that I did the exact same thing down here. Tell me about Etsy Marketplace, and it showed me that I was able to. In fact, I'm just going to refresh, and I'm going to say, tell me about Etsy again, because I don't like when demos go wrong. And while it's doing that, I'm also going to talk about gems as well. Gems are like little mini AI agents working for you with specific tasks. Tasks can be a variety of different things. So, for instance, you can see I have a brainstormer gem and an outreach specialist gem. Let's go into this brainstormer gem and say, so you can see that inside a gem, you can see that it's built with an awesome prompt, which means it has a purpose, goals, overall direction. So you can see it's always an energetic, enthusiastic gem, and step-by-step instructions. So it always offers me 3 ideas tailored to the request. It gives me location-related ideas. This is how the gem works. But I can build my own gem from maybe things that I do in my work all the time. And looking at those instructions, it can be a little bit intimidating. How do I start? Where do I begin? Right? But let's say it's a lot easier than you think. So I'm going to go over here and say I'm a survey guy inside my work. So I always put out culture surveys related to how we're doing internally, and then I want to analyze those surveys. So I'm going to say, help me analyze culture surveys, and then you always recommend solutions to low scores with SMART goals. Very basic instructions, but using Gemini, I can say, use the Gemini to rewrite instructions. So I'm going to do that. And what it'll do is it's actually using AI to expand upon those instructions and give it those purpose, goals, tones, survey, and then behaviors and rules. And so now I have a built-in gem to help me analyze any survey in the future. An amazing update inside gems as well is the ability to add in knowledge into a gem. So I can actually add files from Drive or files from my computer as well to that the gem will reference. This is awesome because with Drive files, if it's like a Google Doc, maybe it's a product sheet or something like that, it will always be updated with the latest of that Google Doc. So I can always say, hey, maybe it's an expert in a product that my company is selling. And I want to ask the gem a question. If someone has been in that doc, editing it, adding in new information, I don't have to worry. That gem will still give me the correct answers about that. So now I'm going to save this gem and work on it in the future. And that's an awesome way to create a gem. You can see that inside settings, Gemini has workspace extensions inside Gmail, Calendar, Docs, Drive, Keep, Tasks as well. To show this off, I'm just going to say I came back from a long break. I'm going to ask Gmail, tell me about emails from a specific person. Maybe I always work with Jon Snow. It's accessing my emails. There, it found all my emails about from Jon Snow. It referenced each of those emails, and it's going on. And I can click into an email to actually go into and directly respond to it as well. Just checking on something. There we go. And it found my Drive files as well. It just took a little bit longer than it usually does with my About Etsy question. So you can see that it found its mission from this PDF, and it found seller services from this wiki. And this is all this awesome information that I've grounded my question in. But let's go back into my emails from Jon Snow. You can see that if I go into Gmail, you'll find that Gemini exists all throughout Workspace now, moving forward. It's in the side panel here referencing whatever application that you are on, which is super useful as well. So I can summarize emails in general. I can see more suggestions on what Gemini can do. In fact, I can say, I can reply to an email with much quicker, quick responses. So you can see that this is a full, easy one-click option to have a fully fledged response to Jon Snow. I can propose a meeting or request project details. But I'm also just going to create an email response. I'm going to say, affirm and suggest a feedback survey. And there we go. Sounds like a great initiative. I can contribute by developing a feedback survey. Insert, boom, send, and then again, that's 5 seconds, 15 seconds, maybe 5 minutes, completely gone by, and I have done everything I need to do with an email. If this email was a longer thread, it would always reference the entire thread as well, but it's a super useful way to get into my Gmail if I have a lot of emails, and I can say, summarize the quarantine. Let me spell it right. Teen alerts. And I can see what has happened recently. And I can also expand this side panel as well. There we go, my quarantine alerts that I can go into, and I can continue to ask questions about this moving forward. Let's go into Drive and show you that the side panel exists here. You can see that I can actually summarize the entire folder that I have inside Drive. This is a new update that happened last month that I am so thankful for. Anybody else on the call have a really disorganized Google Drive? This has really helped me and changed the way I look at my Drive. But here's this folder, and it summarizes each of the documents in here as well. And now I can ask it questions. I can prompt and insert different documents that I've been using as well. I can insert an entire folder. That's a really cool way to be able to ask Gemini questions that I have about my data. I'm actually, before I go into Notebook LM, I'm just going to use some of those documents to create a few things really quickly. I'm going to go and then we're going to go into, let's do supporting community. And I'm also going to hit environmental goals because I hope no one has people on the call affected by what's going on in California. But let's see how Etsy is doing that. I'm going to say, let's do create a doc about Etsy helping communities in need. And it's using and referencing the supporting community and environmental goals PDFs to create maybe a rough draft, maybe 60% of the way there. And again, this is probably a bad Gemini prompt. Oh, there we go. Etsy's commitment to supporting communities in need. All right, so from here, I can take this and I can insert this into my document to start to create a new blog post referencing what's going on and anything going on inside the world. Awesome. Lastly, I'm going to show Notebook LM. Notebook LM is a really awesome feature that is now available for basically everyone inside Google Workspace. And it's amazing because it's sort of like referencing a study buddy. And for instance, in this example, I brought in the PDF of Atomic Habits, and you can see that it read the entire book and it created an audio overview. In fact, this is a bad example. Let's go into Etsy. I made an Etsy shop stats optimizing my sales for 2025 notebook. And this is great for people not just working at Etsy, but maybe who use Etsy as a platform. You can see all my sources here. You can have up to 300 sources inside a single notebook that it references all at once. You can upload docs, slides, websites, and YouTube videos. YouTube videos are awesome for me. Any video that you upload, for the record, for YouTube, it will take the text transcript and use that as reference inside the notebook. And you can also just copy and paste text. So you can see for this, I did a couple YouTube videos on harnessing the power of being an influencer. I took a bunch of different sites from a guide to shipping. This was from the direct Etsy website. And from here, it created an audio overview. So let's listen in. And in fact, I'm going to share my screen so you can listen into it as well. Here we go.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring the world of Etsy selling.
Oh, yeah.
And not just like the basics, but really like what it takes to be successful on Etsy.
Yeah.
We have a ton of information for this deep dive.
Yeah, you do.
We have articles from Etsy itself. We've got videos from actual Etsy sellers, even some influencers who've done collaborations and stuff. So we're going to really dive into all.
So you can see it's a conversation between a man and a woman, very natural. Oh yeah, that sounds cool. Of course. Yeah. And they're responding back and forth in a very natural way, completely made from AI. And also, let's talk about this new update where you can join the conversation almost like you're calling in. So let's do this.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring the world of Etsy. Hey there. Want to share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just created a oak desk, handmade. It's really sturdy. What's the best way to go about selling this on my Etsy site?
Oh, that's fantastic. A handmade oak desk sounds like a really great item to sell.
Yeah, and you've already got a leg up by creating something so sturdy. Let's dive into that specifically.
Well, first, think about your shop name. Is it something descriptive, like Sturdy Oak Creations, or more unique, like the Woodwright's Desk?
And you want to make sure no one else is using that name, so trademark it. And consider capitalizing the words in the name to make it easier to read.
Then, when you're setting up your shop, make sure to use Etsy Payments as the...
So you can see that using a notebook is it's useful for so many different ways. We're also using it internally for multiple things, from sales cycles to product descriptions and questions to everything else under the sun. So Notebook LM is a really, really awesome feature. And also, by the way, look, you can see and share Notebook internally with anyone that you're working with. You can turn on a welcome note for anyone joining that notebook to see what it's about. And you can also just give access to the full notebook, all the sources, or just the chat. So you can just say, hey, this is a notebook about this product or about what's happening internally. You can chat and question. So maybe I'm an HR person. Here are all the how my company works. Talk to the HR notebook to ask your questions, etc. Notebooks are amazing and one of the things that I look forward to in seeing how they develop and how companies use moving forward. But with that, I'm going to move it on to talk to Colin. Colin, how has Etsy been using Gemini going forward? And thanks again for everybody watching my Gemini demo.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'm going to kind of talk through a little bit about how we approached our pilot with Gemini and our learnings from that, and then talk through one of the exciting use cases that came out of that pilot. So in 2024, we piloted Gemini with a lot of success. We had about 100 participants, and had a pretty consistent and growing backlog of other users that showed interest in it. So we ended up rotating new users through the pilot throughout the year, especially during the second half of the year with a lot of new features coming out within Gemini. It really grew by word of mouth from our user base. And then when looking back at kind of our learnings and some of the data that we gathered, some of the surveys that we sent out to our users, we saw usage across the board within Google Workspace apps, but there were two main areas where we saw the most use and most success. And one of those was Google Docs, which was not a surprise because at Etsy, a lot of our business happens in Google Docs. We do a lot of our documentation, meeting notes. We share a lot of Google Docs to share information about project plans. So it made sense that a lot of people would automatically just be doing using Gemini within their documents. We saw specifically through the feedback, people really enjoyed content creation. And I personally ended up using Gemini quite a bit for building templates, getting my documents going. I would get 40, 50, 60% of the way there, so that I could really focus on the creativity side of things when I'm planning out projects or building design documents, and uh, just and kind of get a lot of the busy work out of the way. And then the other area that was really beneficial to people and our teams was summarizing within Google Docs. And this is summarizing the content of a document, because when there's so much work happening in documents, you end up getting a lot of docs shared to you. So we had a lot of people that were being able to get up to speed on a document really quickly. I actually used it in a similar fashion, but when I finished writing a document, I would use Gemini to summarize the document into a couple bullet points that I would stick up at the top for an executive overview. And that shaved 5-10 minutes having to write that myself. Um, Outside of Google Docs, the other area that was really exciting that Chris was just showing quite a bit was the chat interface. We had a lot of users that use that to help them generate content across the platforms. I think like there's a lot of familiarity with that type of interface with an AI chatbot, and then also just being able to use that to iterate on new ideas, to talk through new ideas, to bounce ideas around, and also to generate things like code. We had quite a few engineers and engineer adjacent teams that gave us feedback that they would use it for developing like SQL queries, building new code, debugging code, and even like understanding code. So that was really exciting to see, because it definitely provides sort of like a buddy to work with when you're doing this with Gemini. And then the last thing, just overall from our feedback, we saw that Gemini, our users found it very accessible, having it built into the platforms that were in the productivity apps that we're using day to day. It's helpful. Everybody believed that it saved time. We saw a lot of interest in continuing to use it. And again, generating content, a lot of great feedback on generating content. So with that, I'm going to jump forward and share my screen to talk through some options on how to use it with Google Sheets, as well as some exciting use cases that came up during our pilot. So this is some fictional data that I put together, captures what we might look at if we're looking at customer support data. And just from my standpoint, some of the things that I like to do within Sheets with Gemini is I work a lot with data exports, raw CSVs, things like that give you a big wall of text, a big wall of numbers. And one of the first things I historically do is try to make it presentable, make it readable. And I would spend 5-10 minutes formatting everything, getting it looking right. Gemini right here down at the bottom just says, hey, convert this to a table. One click, it's done. Saves me a lot of time every time I start a new spreadsheet. It also gives me this option to summarize the table, which is really helpful when I'm getting an export of data, or I'm getting something shared with me, or I'm going back to something that I was working in and trying to remember what exactly it was. So it gives me some information about what is in the columns. It gives me some information about a summary of the purpose of this table. And then one of the things that came up from one of our Gemini All-Stars during the pilot was using data like this for customer support data. Typically, they would work with a spreadsheet that has way more columns in this. I've got 100 rows. They would have thousands or tens of thousands of rows of data. And they would be looking for insights on what our customer needs are, how do we meet those needs currently, where are the opportunities to improve our processes for meeting our customers' needs and providing customer support in a human-centric way. And historically, the approach to that would be creating some bespoke formulas, iterating on that, manually like scanning through the data, scrolling through the spreadsheet, looking at it and building the insights that way. With Gemini, what they found is they could take some straightforward prompts like what support topics saw the most number of escalations, and ask Gemini directly to describe what's going on in the data that they have in front of them. And this saves efforts that went from hours of reporting down to just minutes. And you can see here, Gemini gave me some insight into how it's doing it, and also told us The support topic with the most escalations is checkout with 4 escalations. And I can also ask my fictional data here what percentage of tickets were lost in mail, for instance. And it'll come back with a percentage based on what it's seeing in the data here. And as we see that come through, it's going to say, I think about 9%. Yeah, 9% right here. We can also ask more complex things like create a formula that calculates the top 3 dates with the most number of tickets that have a topic cannot sign in. And these are all the sorts of things that our customer support teams can get information on immediately now from the data of their support tickets and support interactions. And you can see here it provided the formula that I could use, and it also provided a table with the output. Now, let's say I want to do something a little more complex. I want to adjust and augment this table here, and I want to say like a day of week rather than just the date. And let's say I work in formulas a lot. I used to go back to formulas, old spreadsheets, try to figure out what I was doing before. Now I can just work directly in Gemini and say, what is the formula for creating a day of week if I have a date? And you'll see that Gemini will provide a response that provides a formula right here, and I can plug that right in. And that's actually not going to be the right one, so we're going to try requerying and give us a different one, a different response, and see what it says this time. But one thing that's nice is it'll reference the sheet in front of me. So it'll say with this response, it references that A2 cell, which is exactly what I need. So I can plug that in, I can carry it down through all my rows, and now I've got a day of week that I can query with something like which day of the week has the most tickets. And you can build upon it that way. You can actually interact with the data. You can query it, you can build insights, and then refine your data based on those insights, and then work with Gemini to build more complex insights, which is really great to see. And this is one of the things that's just very exciting and changes the way we work with our data, changes the way we think about the processes that we build out of data, and makes it way more accessible for our teams. And with that, I'd like to talk a little bit more about another aspect of the Gemini pilot that really added to the success was our partnership with Wursta and with Google. And I'd like to invite Chris back up so we can talk about our work together.
Hey, Colin, thanks so much. I was actually thinking about our partnership just yesterday, and I was looking in my calendar. I remember we came to the Etsy offices in New York City in person in July of last year. So we've been deploying and enabling your folks with Gemini for a while now. I have a question for you to start, which was looking back since then, and now looking now, what kind of metrics have been useful for like focusing on Gemini's impact at Etsy?
Yeah, so there's some stuff that we can get directly within the admin console that's been very helpful. So we get monthly active users to understand out of how many people we have licensed, how many of them are actually using Gemini, and that's kind of like our North Star to understand, if people like it, if it's doing good, if it's benefiting their work, then they're going to continue using it. We also can dig in to see like which applications it's being used in, where are specific users using that, and so we can take something like here's our docs users, overlay that on top of here's our business how our business is laid out, and like where are our docs users? Okay, well maybe they're in this organization, and maybe we can find out like what is a use case for that organization to really dig in, which has been really beneficial and something we're looking forward to expanding.
That's totally true. In fact, what Colin's talking about is in the admin console, you see specifically the number of time that someone uses Gemini in docs. And it's actually, you can rank that to see how they rank among everybody else who's using Gemini in docs, or just Gemini in the app as well. So finding those like specific expert users internally that you didn't even know, like, oh, my legal analyst is all of a sudden using docs all the time. Let's see how he's using it. And talking to the specific people is a really awesome way to see how Gemini is being used inside and internally. My other question is a little bit self-serving, but how has Wursta's support and expertise been helpful throughout this? I hope we've been helpful, and how has that worked out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Wursta's been there to help with trainings, with office hours. I think one of the biggest things that benefited me and my team in administering the Gemini for Workspace is As we've talked about, this is an evolving space. You saw Danny's slide with like the number of releases, and that wasn't even everything. But staying on top of those and understanding, like, hey, this is coming down the pipe, and here's something that looks really exciting. Let's talk about use cases. Let's figure out how this might fit within Etsy, and actually work with our users to capture that and capture their use cases and kind of build some solutions for how we could use Gemini to better our work. That's been extremely efficient and just building our productivity. And it's yeah, we couldn't have done it without you, basically.
Thanks so much. I mean, you're an amazing client to work with as well as all our clients. We like to crowdsource all the ways that everyone is using Gemini in so many different ways, and bring up like, oh, this person was using this and that, and connecting it to see all the myriad of ways that you can use Gemini internally. And I'm glad that it's been successful at Etsy. So thank you so much for your partnership, Colin. Really appreciate it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about securing data, and then Wursta's what Wursta offers as well, just to hit the nail on the head, and then we'll end everything with questions and answers at the end. All right. So, firstly, with security in Gemini, how security works within Gemini is that every company that gets Gemini has their own large language model instance in its own security bubble. So you can see that there's the customer data boundary, which is then enveloped in the Google Workspace trust boundary as well. So every question that you're asking, every input that you're putting into Gemini does not leave and get trained on the large language model at large, like worldwide as well. And the other way that Gemini really helps companies with security is a feature that you can use as an add-on, which is the AI data classification feature. This means that it can label drive files automatically with a few bits of training, because you have to train the model. So you can do this with a drive file labeling. If you, for instance, are labeling SOWs or legal files the exact same way, Gemini is trained on those labels so that it will now label things in the future and label things in the past as well. Say something isn't a legal file and then it's edited to become something like that. The AI data classification feature will automatically label those documents and files inside Drive for you, which then means that you can apply DLP on those files as well, making your information inside your org a lot more secure as well. So yeah, let's talk about our transformation packaging that Wursta offers. We do right now. We are offering two specific services. The first is just a starter discovery lab for 4 hours. We do a half-a-day workshop on how your company could use Gemini and best to take advantage of it. This is a great way to test out Gemini features, get feedback from it, and then also our feedback goes directly to Google as well. And then we also do multiple versions of a Gemini enablement. The one that we're talking about in this webinar right now is 6 weeks. This is structured to re-rolling out. It starts with assessing what your company needs and how it could best use AI, and then implementing AI data classification, as well as an admin setup and training, how to best use the admin features of Gemini, as well as specific end user training done by myself or our professional services team, which are great, awesome, highly qualified people. There's Kate, there's Rachel, there's Maddie, there's a bunch of others and Brian that also do a variety of different Gemini trainings, who all have their own specific version of expertise. We also do communications, adoption measurement, as well as specific training videos as well. We also do custom development services. So if there's something that you want to be and want you see AI working specifically for your company, we're able to talk about that with you. Whether it's for search and conversation, if you want to talk about its bot capabilities or personalizing interactions, if it's content generation, we can lead workshops with that. Whether it's image recognition as well, how Gemini works with that. My demo for Gemini was a rocket blast through a lot of the features, but some of the things I didn't even mention off the top of my head were its image generation, its image recognition, Google Vids, its slides creation. The list goes down and on and on and on. And then also anticipating needs as well with these updates that are coming down the pike with Gemini. We have a bunch of resources for you as well that hopefully are going into the chat. We have the Google prompting guide, which is a great way for a starter person to use Gemini in multiple different verticals. You'll see how a marketing person could use Gemini versus how a salesperson could use Gemini, as well as we do at Wursta. You should check out our YouTube. It is a plethora of information, including quick tip guides for Gemini as well. These come every week. They are actually done by me and the awesome in-house editing team here. Thank you, Alex, and others. And then and so you can see and subscribe to our channel to see the latest and greatest updates from Gemini and also from Google Workspace in general. So occasionally we'll put in tips and tricks on how to use Google Docs, Sheets, and Slides that have nothing to do with Gemini. But right now our content is mainly Gemini based because it's the most important thing that's happening by far in terms of technology. And with that, I'm going to open up the screens for question and answer, and I'm going to bring back our awesome guests, which are Danny and Colin. Danny from Google, Colin from Etsy. I'm going to look into the chat and see if we have any Q&A. Feel free to add in any questions that you might have. But while we're waiting for those questions to come in, Danny, what's it been like working with Etsy and with Wursta?
Probably Etsy is probably my favorite account. I think we've been meeting every week for a year and a half at this point on the journey with AI, and Wursta is probably my favorite go-to partner. And so it's a good combination of the three of us working together.
Thanks. That's great. That's great to hear. Igor has a question. Can you share some insights related to yesterday's announcement that Gemini will be included in the Google Workspace license? I'm going to take that to Danny since he's our Google contact.
Say that one more time.
Can you share some insights related to yesterday's announcement that Gemini will be included in the Google Workspace license?
Yes, very exciting news that we all learned about yesterday. So Google's approach to generative AI is democratizing it for everyone. So any workspace license that any company has will now have the same features of all the Gemini for Workspace features that you either may have purchased or you may have seen, all encapsulated in one license. So there's no add-on per se after the 1st of February. I would say this is a net positive thing for everyone to be able to, instead of like pick and choose who can get the luxury of using generative AI, it also reduces the operational aspect of things. One caveat though, it depends, it's controlled by your company. So you won't necessarily get the license right away. It depends on the admin who controls your workspace on whether or not that they turn it on for you. So just something to be mindful of, like you won't see it turn on day one unless your company authorizes it.
That's a great caveat to mention. It'll be turned off automatically for those companies who haven't opted into it yet, and they can turn it on with specific people as well, specific OUs. So maybe they could even test it out with certain groups to make sure that it's something that their company wants to take advantage of. Awesome. Thank you so much for that information, Danny. A different Danny asks, can the workspace admin see other staff searches, or is it 100% private? I'm going to answer this one and say that right now, in the admin console, all searches are private to those specific staff folks as far as I know for now. Yeah, I don't know if that'll change in the future, but right now all searches are private. No one else can see them. You can see how many times someone searched. And you can see how many times someone used the app, and you can see how many times someone used the side panel, but that is it in terms of reporting for that. Anything else anybody else wants to add?
Yeah, I'd confirm that's accurate. I would say the only other caveat for admins is that you have really granular controls now on what you can turn on and off for Gemini by app. So for example, if you only want your users to have it for Google Docs, for whatever reason, you can do that. Or in like our take notes for me function, which is super valuable to take notes while you're on a call. If for some reason you don't want your company to be using that, you can turn that off. So the granular controls, along with the detailed metrics by apps, by user, really give you valuable insights on how your employees are using Gemini.
That's a whole nother thing I didn't talk about with my Gemini demo is the take notes for me in Google Meet, something that I use as a superpower every single day. These notes are inside the Google Meet itself and then are also saved in the calendar event as a Google Doc for someone to reference at a later time. And it's one of my favorite Gemini features. A few more questions. What happens if you were to stop paying for Gemini? Will your system just go back to how it was before? Generally speaking, yeah, your system will go back to how it was before you're using Gemini. You'll still have the documents that you created. You'll still have the drive files. You'll still have anything that you probably created with using Gemini. You won't have access to the side panel. You won't have access to gemini.google.com if you just turn it off.
And I can add that during our pilot, like I mentioned, we rotated users through. So occasionally we would take licenses away from users that, to free up space for new users to come in. And there was no disruption of the work that they were doing or anything like that. They just didn't have access to the Gemini features.
Mm-hmm. Will Gemini Business or Gemini Advanced license be included in Google Workspace? Asked Igor. Yes, generally speaking, it's Gemini Business it's Gemini Advanced will be included in Google Workspace, not in Starter, but in Business and Business Plus. Gemini will be included. I think you'll be missing out specifically on AI data classification. That is an add-on. Otherwise, Danny, anything else to add to that question?
Well, it's actually not an add-on, but the only way to fully get AI classification is to have an Enterprise Plus license, which is our top SKU. And that's the license that comes with all the bells and whistles, formerly known as Gemini Enterprise. So that would be the way that you'd be able to get AI classification.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we have a question for Wursta. Is the 6 weeks training session included in our reseller agreement or an additional add-on? I don't know the answer to that question, actually. That's a great question, Trey. Let's see if anybody wants to chat and answer that question for you. Brian is on the call in the background. Also, while we're here, I also want to thank BrandLive for providing an awesome platform to be able to do this webinar in, and they are hosting this webinar. So thank you to BrandLive for your support. Brian, if you have an answer to Trey's question.
There we go. Sorry, trying to get added in here to the conversation. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. So that's a great question about the training. So it's not generally included with just your normal reseller agreement with Wursta. It would be sort of an extra add-on, but we do have a whole bunch of different training services, options, packages, what have you, around Gemini for Workspace. So you can just reach out to whoever your Wursta account manager is, and we can create a custom scope for that for you, whatever would fit best for your organization.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. And thank you to Danny, to Colin from Google, to Etsy for joining us for this webinar. I really appreciate your guys' support and look forward to collaborating with you more in the future.
Thank you all. Good day.
So thank you again to everyone here who joined this webinar. We have one more slide, I think, to use. And if you're interested in contacting Wursta, email us at info.wursta.com, and you can find all the information there you'd like. And if you are interested, or if you already are with Wursta, email your account manager as well, and they will get contacted with you at accountmanagement@wursta.com. Check out our website, www.wursta.com. Again, my name is Chris. You can reach out to me as well. You can find me on LinkedIn, and look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks again for joining our webinar, Gemini and Etsy. So this is Etsy's Gemini for Workspace Journey. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Looking forward to talking with you soon. Thank you so much.